a photo op. And as you were talking about the history there, I just wanted to interject with the current and arguably the future, because this conversation is going to go from here. A lot happening in London with the president there and with Americans making news all over the place. Let's watch and listen together. So you had the royal greeting of Queen Elizabeth II with our President and First Lady. And now the Guard of Honor will give a salute. We'll continue to watch and listen.
great symbols, national world symbols, various people that represent various groups of people or represents what the body stands for.
So in the countryside in England, outside London, at Windsor Castle, you see Queen Elizabeth II there has just finished what they call an inspection of
almost like
the Guard of Honor, and then the
National Patriarchs
military guard with our president
but
and First
they're not
Lady by her side. And now
what you would
the
call
greeting continues.
liberators
and
like
in
Moses
McCallum, the host of the story,
other
and Martha,
great prophets out of the Bible
and are able
that
to maybe
are called
take in some more color
patriarchs.
for us.
But in a way, they are international political patriarchs of being associated with this type of level of entry.
She's in great shape. She walked up and down inspecting the guards as she has done so many times. But obviously, this is the first time for President Trump, and he has said that this meeting, of the meetings he's had this week, is probably going to be the least stressful that he's had, including NATO and the meetings that he had with Theresa May. The Queen will be very clear about not discussing things like Brexit. She doesn't want to talk about any of that with the president, although over the course of her reign, she will in private discuss politics, obviously, with the prime ministers. She has met with all of them on a regular weekly basis during the course of her reign. But this is really sort of a very formal get-to-know-you moment. It should only last about 40 minutes inside. They will have tea, as the British like to do, and they will probably be in either the Oak Room or in the Queen's private sitting room, are the two areas that she tends to entertain presidents and leaders when they come to Windsor. But obviously a very special moment, and I think probably a bit of a relief for Donald Trump.
That's an interesting way to put it. A beautiful day, and Americans making news across London at Wimbledon. We have two of them in the finals now. Martha, thank you. This Fox News alert, we knew this was coming. A Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein holding a news conference right now for law enforcement. Let's watch and listen.
Interfere.
Need to listen to this.
One of those defendants and a 12th Russian military officer are charged with conspiring to infiltrate computers of organizations involved in administering elections, including state boards of election, secretaries of state, and companies that supply software used to administer elections. According to the allegations in the indictment, the defendants worked for 2 units of the main intelligence directorate of the Russian General Staff, known as the GRU. The units engaged in active cyber operations to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. There was one unit that engaged in active cyber operations by stealing information, and a different unit that was responsible for disseminating the stolen information. The defendants used 2 techniques to steal information. First, they used a scheme known as spear phishing, which involves sending misleading email messages and tricking the users into disclosing their passwords and security information. Second, the defendants hacked into computer networks and installed malicious software that allowed them to spy on users and capture keystrokes, take screenshots, and exfiltrate or remove data from those computers. The defendants accessed email accounts of volunteers and employees of a U.S. presidential campaign, including the campaign chairman, starting in March of 2016. They also hacked into the computer networks of a congressional campaign committee and a national political committee. The defendants covertly monitored the computers and planted hundreds of files containing malicious computer code and stole emails and other documents. The conspirators created fictitious online personas, including DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0, and they used those personas to release information, including thousands of stolen emails and other documents, beginning in June of 2016. The defendants falsely claimed that DC Leaks was a group of American hackers and that Guccifer 2.0 was a lone Romanian hacker. In fact, both were created and controlled by the Russian GRU. In addition to releasing documents directly to the public, The defendants transferred stolen documents to another organization that is not identified by name in the indictment, and they used that organization as a pass-through to release the documents. They discussed the timing of the release in an attempt to enhance the impact on the election. In an effort to conceal their connections to Russia, the defendants used a network of computers around the world, and they paid for it using cryptocurrencies. The conspirators corresponded with several Americans during the course of the conspiracy through the internet. There's no allegation in this indictment that the Americans knew they were corresponding with Russian intelligence officers. In a second related conspiracy, Russian GRU officers hacked the website of a state election board and stole information about 500,000 voters. They also hacked into computers of a company that supplied software used to verify voter registration information. They targeted state and local officials responsible for administering elections, and they sent spear phishing emails to people involved in administering elections, including attaching malicious software. The indictment includes 11 criminal allegations and a forfeiture allegation. Count 1 charges 11 defendants for conspiring to access computers without authorization and to damage those computers in connection with efforts to interfere with the presidential election. Counts 2 through 9 charge those 11 defendants with aggravated identity theft by employing the usernames and passwords of victims in order to commit computer fraud. Count 10 charges those 11 defendants with money laundering for transferring cryptocurrencies through a web of transactions in order to purchase computer servers, register domains, and make other payments in furtherance of their hacking activities while trying to conceal their connections to Russia. Count 11 charges 2 defendants for a separate conspiracy to access computers without authorization and to damage those computers in connection with efforts to infiltrate computers used to administer elections. Finally, the indictment seeks the forfeiture of property involved in the criminal activity. There is no allegation in this indictment that any American citizen committed a crime. There's no allegation that the conspiracy changed the vote count or affected any election result. The special counsel's investigation is ongoing, and there will be no comments by the special counsel at this time. Assistant Attorney General John Demers is here with me today because we intend to transition responsibility for this indictment to the Justice Department's National Security Division while we await the apprehension of the defendants. Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General Ed O'Callahan is also with me, and he's been assisting in managing the special counsel investigation. I want to caution you, the people who speculate about federal investigations usually do not know all of the relevant facts. We do not try cases on television or in congressional hearings. Most anonymous leaks are not from the government officials who are actually conducting these investigations. We follow the rule of law, which means that we follow procedures and we reserve judgment. We complete our investigations and we evaluate all of the relevant evidence before we reach any conclusion. That is how the American people expect their Department of Justice to operate, and that is how our department is going to operate. In our justice system, everyone who's charged with a crime is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. It should go without saying, the people who are not charged with a crime also are presumed innocent. The indictment was returned today because prosecutors determined that the evidence was sufficient to present these allegations to a federal grand jury. Our analysis is based solely on the facts, the law, and Department of Justice policies. I briefed President Trump about these allegations earlier this week. The President is fully aware of the Department's actions today. On my remarks, I have not identified the victims. when we confront foreign interference in American elections, it's important for us to avoid thinking politically as Republicans or Democrats, and instead to think patriotically as Americans. Our response must not depend on which side was victimized. The internet allows foreign adversaries to attack America in new and unexpected ways. Free and fair elections are always hard fought and contentious. There will always be adversaries who seek to exacerbate our divisions and try to confuse, divide, and conquer us. So long as we are united in our commitment to the values enshrined in the Constitution, they will not succeed. The partisan warfare fueled by modern technology does not fairly reflect the grace, dignity, and unity of the American people. The blame for election interference belongs to the criminals who committed election interference. We need to work together to hold the perpetrators accountable, and we need to keep moving forward to preserve our values, protect against future interference, and defend America. I have time to take a few questions.
Quick question for you, sir. Number one, the time of the day on the eve of the president's meeting with Putin, can you talk about that? And also, just today, the president described the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. Your response?
The timing, as I mentioned, is a function of the collection of the facts, the evidence in the law, and a determination that it was sufficient to present the indictment at this time. As I mentioned, I did brief the president. With regard to the nature of the investigation, I only comment on the evidence. But the evidence that is reflected in our indictments and in our charges represents a determination by prosecutors and agents without regard to politics that we believe the evidence is sufficient to justify the charges.
Harry? Yes, Deputy Attorney General, I know you've talked about the fact that, in your view, the evidence doesn't show any votes were changed as a result of this hacking. But you did say that a company used as a pass-through coordinated with these defendants to enhance the timing of the release and the impact on the election. Can you talk a little bit about what the evidence you have shows in that respect?
So what I've talked about today is what is alleged in the indictment. We know that, according to the allegations in the indictment, the goal of the conspirators was to have an impact in the election. What impact they may have had, or what their motivation may have been independently of what's required to prove this offense, is a matter of speculation. That's not our responsibility. What I said is there's no allegation in the indictment about it, and that's not our charge.
In terms of the state election information, you said about 500,000 voters information was collected. Is there any evidence that what the Russians did with that information? And is there any evidence of other states being successfully penetrated by the Russians?
I think that it's important for you to understand what I've told you are the allegations that are included in the indictment. The FBI and other intelligence community agencies are working constantly to defend against cyber attacks in the United States. This case is just about one particular effort that was made during the 2016 election. The efforts of our department, of the Department of Homeland Security, of other federal agencies, and of all of the state election boards throughout the country are ongoing. And those efforts preceded this indictment, and they're going to post-date this indictment. So we have continued to share any relevant intelligence with all of our partners. It would take a longer time to talk about this, but there is a concerted and organized effort by the federal government to make sure that we do deter and prevent any sort of cyber attacks on our elections, and that we harden our election systems to prevent against any kind of intrusions.
We'll take last question from that.
Deputy Attorney General, you mentioned that you briefed President Trump on this earlier this week. Did he indicate his support for this action, and what was his reaction?
I'll allow the president to speak for himself. Obviously, it was important for the president to know what information we've uncovered, because he's got to make very important decisions for the country. So he needs to understand what evidence we have of foreign election interference. Thank you very much.
Who ordered the attack?
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein talking about looking at Russian meddling, and the headline that you saw him just wrapping up there was, the President of the United States, ahead of his Europe trip, was told about this. He was briefed on it, and he's fully aware of what is happening today. 12 people named in this indictment, not by name, but by what they do, if you will. No indication that Americans knew that they were maybe having any kind of dealings with these Russians who were on the internet under assumed identities. In fact, 2 of the 9 charges are aggravated identity theft. They call themselves DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0. They were looking to burst into the scene, if you will, and to meddle in our elections, according to the Deputy Attorney General, with 2 techniques. Spear phishing, by sending emails and trying to target people's passwords and trying to trick people into giving up information. And then the other way was to hack into computer networks and spy on users and try to hit certain keystrokes and see what they could figure out. They are seeking the forfeiture of all of the materials, like computer servers and whatnot, in this. And Rosenstein, just one last thing, says that this is now being turned over to the National Security Division at DOJ. Charlie Hurt on the couch with us today. Your impression?
Well, thank goodness. This is the Russian investigation that we need. It's the Russian investigation we've needed all along. It's the Russian, the effort to thwart Russia that should have been going on under the Obama administration when all of this stuff was actually happening. Unfortunately, the whole issue has been so politicized by people trying to smear Donald Trump that we lose sight of this very important issue. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, Rod Rosenstein, at the end of that, after giving a very good recitation of the charges and what they were doing, I'm thrilled that they're doing this. At the end, he goes off into this lecture about politics.
I wonder if it's not part of what you said, though, because, Rachel, this is so politicized. And what he was talking about is our response must not be based on who benefits or who is harmed by interference in our elections. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that was the bottom line.
Well, and he did say the blame is on the Russians indicted. It's not on anybody else, which says it's not on Obama, as you mentioned. Right. Really, this happened under Obama's watch, and so that's something. I think the other important thing he did say, he said it did not impact the election. Yeah. And I think the
outcome of it.
The outcome of it. Mm-hmm. And the other important thing is there's still no evidence that Donald Trump's campaign colluded with the Russians in this. So I think those are two very important things that come out. We spent millions of dollars in almost 2 years trying to find even a scrap of evidence about that.
Well, but now we know they did something. Yeah. But I thought it was, and I'm going to say it again, no indication that Americans knew with whom they were necessarily dealing. Dave?
I want to comment right here on this because of it being so sensitive in regard to our national security. We believe what has occurred, that the fault falls upon to the feet of high-ranking officials, regardless whether they be in this agency or this agency or this agency, regardless whether they are specialists pertaining to computer software. We believe that the fault falls upon to the feet of the American officials up onto their watch. Because the bottom line in these alleges is that they was eavesdropping that has been interpreted as meddling in our affairs. We do the exact same thing in other countries in spy technique procedures in making sure that various elections are held in the standard that we have created for ourselves over here in America, which is fair, honest, open elections. We do the exact same thing. Now you have to ask yourself a question: what is the intent in behind this? It's kind of like taking a lock and placing it onto a door or something that you do not want to be broken into. It helps to keep an honest person honest, is all this does. if the American people, especially the political arenas, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes, sifting down into the churches, would have openly exposed this biblical Bible prophecy in the aspect that it should have been exposed 30 plus years ago, of the beginning phases of a global international network, we do not believe that there would be no questions at hand towards why the Russians was eavesdropping on what was going on. The fact of the matter is, we believe that the Russians was extremely concerned because they're almost our neighbors just on the other side of Alaska, pertaining to them being on the same side of the equator that we're on. And out of concern, they was listening in towards hoping that they would be able to roust our curiosity to the point that we awakened in these areas pertaining to cyber practices that we know now are real. That these attacks, these hacks that are coming from various places, regardless whether it be Sony or banking industries, are real. And if Russia has done anything, we believe that they have helped to, hey, wake up. Don't you see what's going on? If they have done anything, they have helped us more than hurt us in these new pioneer experiences that now even Donald Trump acknowledges that we need to create another national defense. We've got 5 in total pertaining to Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and the Coast Guard, that we need to have another, instead of having Air Force, now we need to have Space Force. We need to have another agency created just to counter-react and to put up walls and breaches and to prevent people from hacking and stealing identities and doing what that they're obviously doing. Because whenever it comes to the new pioneers, it's similar to what happened to us over here in America whenever they decided to say to everybody, go west, young man, go west, young man, go west, young man. And of course, the arches of St. Louis represent the archway into a new pioneer of being able to calm, settle, and yes, colonize, I guess would be the right word, the territories that was out west. It's the same way with the interference in cyber space internet. These are areas that need to be fine-tuned. These are areas that we need to really pay close attention to. Those who are capable and have the right tools to be able to see what's going on. Because in today's society, it's not a matter of working harder, but working smarter. In today's society, it's not so much of having just a common thief, but now we have smart thieves. My son, in ending of this conversation that I'm having with you, whenever he went out west, out into the Denver, Colorado area, detected that there was a breach in one of his accounts. And the way that this breach happened is that somebody had taken their telephone while my son was reaching into his pocket and taking his card out and slipping it into one of the sliders, that somebody took their phone and put it over his shoulder and took a snapshot or a picture of that card. Also, sitting there watching, wound up getting his PIN number. Don't ask me how, but a lot of times I'll take my hand and I'll cover over the shield, because you always have cameras above you pertaining to security systems. And who's to say that the cameras that's above you, the people that's in behind the cameras, are legit? Whenever you're sitting there pressing in your information, your PIN number or your secret code, all they have to have is your card, those numbers, your PIN number, and your information has just been breached. Your account has just been breached. So getting back on the Russia deal that has been so intense and so dramatic. If anything, we believe that the Russians should be complimented on bringing this to our awareness in the 21st century in 2018, because these areas of day-to-day practices that we now have learned to have to adjust to are real. This is where the world is evolving to. Once more, we're pioneering into areas that were not actually what you would call dominated, or have completely, totally what would be the right word? Controlled in these areas. And because there has been breaches, regardless whether it was Sony, the banking industry, Wells Fargo, or involving the election, these should be wake-up calls. Bing, 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 for the American people, especially the American government, because they have failed in areas towards protecting our day-to-day, everyday lives. And these occurrences did not take place on Donald Trump's watch, but these occurrences took place on Obama's watch. They took place on Bill Clinton's watch. They took place on young Bush's watch, as well as senior citizen Bush, as well as Mr. Ronald Reagan. You see, it was Ronald Reagan that got to talking about space wars, that got to talking about various communications with various satellites in various places all over the world. So the technology was already there in the late 80s, that basically the Navy, the Army, the big guys, that was already in control of. Well, now that has been handed over to the general population. And because of us not being on top of our game, we have all had to have become computer dialysis experts in knowing how to control the little device that we hold in our hand, that's either controlled by Android or smartphone. We have all had to go through this transition of learning how to basically control something that we ain't never had to learn to control, unless you was raised up or your career was involving that type of industry to begin with. So it's been a learning curve for a lot of us, including doctors, including lawyers, including law enforcement agencies. Like I said, it's been a pioneer. We're going west. We're having to deal with the elements. And as we're having to deal with the elements, we find out, hey, the weather's different up in the Rockies. Hey, you got to watch out for thunderstorms up in the mountains, because it causes torrential rainfall or flooding down here below. We got to put up with the elements towards the bears and the wildness and the rattlesnakes. And of course, at the time, whenever they done what they done, they had to put up with the elements of the Indians out there that was still hadn't been colonized yet. So basically, it's the same thing. We're just having to do it in a high-tech form. But to me, to us, here at 291 Thompson Road, we think that if anything, we can't prove this, but we think if anything, Mr. Putin was trying to awaken the sleeping giant, not control the sleeping giant. For surely to God, they had more sense than that they was actually going to be able to control or dominate or dictate towards who we had in office or who we didn't have in office, because that would be very, very foolish thinking on their behalf. And I don't think that those people are that arrogant to that extent. Once more, we want to thank you, appreciate you for listening. We want to thank you for going on YouTube and watching some of our programs pertaining to the Windmill Ministries missions that has went through a great deal of sacrifice and suffering in the past 30 years. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us, those who are striving towards a better way of life, those who are adaptable in the 21st century, those who are wanting to strive and evolve into something bigger and better for the betterment of the good for all of us. Not just those on this side of the equator, but those also on the other side of the equator too as well. We want to say thank you and shalom.